Hi, I'm Jennifer and I'm here at the Cool Tool Studio, and today I'm going to demonstrate for you a simple way to torch fire 24 karat gold onto fine silver. And these are the products that we used for our 24 karat gold over fine silver pendant. Here's the cool slip to prevent sticking. In this box is the accent gold for silver, clear acrylic roller, a clay cutter, the micro fine 3M sanding sponge, and then here are the clays, the art clay silver and the paste. We have our dusting brush. This is the textured roller, our jewelry shape square, funky square template here. Clay thickness rolling frames, 2, 3, and 4 thickness rolling frames. This is our water dish with a groove in it for your brush. 2 little glass containers for water and for mixing our gold paste. The clay hydrator to keep our clay workable. A little container here with a screw top to store our excess, the gold clay that we recaptured. Then some of the other tools we used are a palette knife, a pipette, a clay pick. Here's our agate burnisher, a very fine precision brush to add the gold, and then a fatter round brush just for moistening the gold and keeping everything soft. Tweezers, and then a locking tweezers that we used when we burnished the piece. And then of course we have our finishing stick and our work surface. So for this project, we're going to start by making actually our base, our little square base piece. And we're going to start with, gosh, I'm so not precise with my quantity, but just a ball of clay. I would say maybe 4 or 5 grams-ish to start. We're going to use our 4-card thickness rolling frame and get that on there. And I'm going to use a little bit of cool slip on our roller. Not enough to really make it gleam, but enough to be able to roll this clay. Now when I do clay, rolling wise, use a very light touch. You're taking a lot of material and spreading it, and what we want to do is more spreading than stretching. So keep that in mind. So I've rolled this now to 4 cards thick. I'm going to remove this. Okay, so then I'm going to grab one of our textured rollers, and this is a little tiny roller, so I'm going to have to use 2 3-card side by side, but what you could do really is just use playing cards, 3 playing cards on each side if you don't have 2 sets of thickness rolling frames. So here's my textured roller, and I've got it on either side on 3 cards. I'm going to just one pass, and there is our texture, our beautiful little floral texture. I'm going to use the shape templates. This is actually called Funky Square. I kind of like that, Funky Square. And we will do, actually I think it'll fit this size here. So I'm kind of rotating it to get the optimum number of flowers in here. So I've got my, my template where I want it, and make sure that when you cut with your clay pick that it is perfectly up and down and not tilted, because you want to actually get the most amount of material and you want to get a nice clean edge. All right. So now we'll remove the excess, peel that away. And right now we're just going to let that dry. We'll refine that with a sanding sponge when it's dry. But I'm going to leave it sit here for just a second, and we're going to make the bail. I'm going to use my clay cutters right here, and I'm going to just coax the end of this up. And again, do not be afraid to handle wet clay. It's okay. Use a light touch, and I'm going to put it right on here for now because it's going to go in the dehydrator to dry. While that's drying, we're going to do this bail here. And as you can see, it's just a little half circle, half loop. So I'm going to grab another little bite of clay, a little pinch of clay, and put a little more cool slip on my roller and gently roll there. So I've rolled this to 2 cards thick, and I'm going to cut it, but before I cut it, I'm actually going to remove it just so it's kind of lost its stickiness to the Teflon work surface here. So I'm going to cut just a little thin strip. I'm going to pick up the end. I don't need this whole thing, so if I smush an end, it's not bad. So I'm going to roll this onto here. I'm going to take my cutters and just cut away that crazy piece there. All right. And I'm going to let this just get a little bit hard. I'm not going to thoroughly dry it because eventually what I want to do is cut this way down. So I can cut most of it off here, either side. Actually, that should be perfect. And there we have our bale part, and that's going to dry too. We'll put that in the dehydrator, and then we'll connect those pieces when they're both dry. So I'm taking the 3M sanding sponge, and I'm going to gently sand. Now, here's the thing with this particular, there's a little detail to the sides of this. I think I'm going to sand those down, only because for this video, it'll be a little bit easier to kind of show you where I'm at here. Try and keep some of the integrity of the design, but okay, we want to sand the edges. And then we also want to get a little sanding on these parts here that are kind of kicking up a little. So I'm going to run so I don't have to pick the piece up. I'm just going to leave it down. I'm going to run the sponge just along the edge. It may give it a slight bevel, but that's okay. It actually adds to the piece. And now is the time to attach these together. Now we're doing dry to dry, so I have to decide which way it's going to go up. And I think I'm going to have this side up. So I'm going to flip it over this way. And here's where my piece is going to go. So I'm going to take my, my brush and get it wet, but not soaking wet. And I'm going to put a little bit of water here. And I'm going to hold this gently and put a little bit of water on either of these 2 edges. And I'm going to let that soak in. And my recommendation is actually to do that twice. Do it again. Once it kind of soaks in, I'm going to wet it one more time and wet these one more time. And to ensure that there's a strong bond between this little hidden, see, it's going to be a little hidden bale here. So to ensure that this bond is going to be really strong, I'm actually going to use paste. So you can make your own paste from lump clay, or you can buy it already made for you. It's kind of nice. It's got a nice creamy texture if you buy it already made. So I'm going to take that little bit of paste and just roll it on there with my brush. And then I'm also going to put a little bit on either side of my bale. Now I made my bale plain. You can see on here and on my sample piece, it's very plain, but you know, so you can actually texture that and make it all pretty. Adding a little bit more moisture here. I'm going to pick my piece up with my tweezers. Place it where it needs to go. And then just do a little bit of wiggle to make sure that it connects. And once this is dry, we will torch fire it. Okay, so our piece is dry, and you can see there's the bale. And what I've done is I've actually kind of created a little recess here in my board so that that bale can kind of rest in there while I'm firing, and then nothing will have a chance to slump. It usually doesn't slump, but just in case. So now I'm going to fire up my torch, and I'm going to start to heat it until it gets salmon color, and then I'll keep it at salmon for 2 minutes. Right now I'm just starting to heat it, and I'm burning off the binder. And you'll see that there's smoke, so we have to always be in a well-ventilated area And we have our little smoke remover here. So as you can see, I'm going to go over here. See, it's turning that nice salmon color. So I'm going to go half in here so we can kind of get the idea. And I have to keep that on for 2 minutes. Keep the angle of the flame about 45 degrees. And if you see it getting a little too bright, pull back, but keep the flame moving. Because you want every piece of the piece to be fired. So I'm done here, but what I'm going to do, and this is just a little thing that I personally want to do, is I'm going to take this very hot piece with these tweezers, I'm going to flip it over, and I am going to torch the back again for just a short period of time, just to make sure that this bail is on there good. Now the things that are lighting up here, that's from the fiberboard, so that I'm not going to worry about. It'll just burn away eventually. But I want to make sure I get at least up to that salmon color for a short time. Because as you can see, my piece is salmon, but the bail isn't quite salmon yet. And I really want to make sure that I have a nice salmon color to that bail. So I'm just going to run it for about a minute or so, just to make sure that's fired good. So we have our fired piece, and it's set off to the side for the moment, because what we're going to do now is actually mix up our gold. And this is our gold, and this is how it comes, and it looks like there's not a ton in there, but there's quite a bit in there. Now, if you really want to work with gold and you're a little apprehensive, you can always share this with a friend or friends. Purchase one, share it all, and have some fun with it, because it really does make beautiful pieces. So at this point, I like to use the palette knife, because what it does is it allows me to grab just a tiny bit of product, and then I'm going to put it in this little glass cup here, and that's what I'm going to use to mix to actually do my piece. Now, just for safety reasons, or in case I sneeze, I'm closing this back up so we keep it safe, and I'm setting that off to the side. I also have, and this is an important thing to remember, is I have a little cup here, and it has a wet paper towel in it. So anytime I use a brush or something where I cannot reclaim the gold immediately, I will wipe it off in this little container, and that way I can send that to the refinery and recapture any gold that I may have stuck in a brush or something else. So I have another little glass cup here with some distilled water, and I'm actually going to use a pipette because I want to start adding water to this gold slowly. I'm looking for the consistency between maple syrup and honey, probably a little more towards maple syrup. But again, you really, it's almost like one drop at a time to get this stuff mixed. So I've added a drop. So it takes a little, you have to be patient with this because the gold powder is just a bit resistant to the water, but once you, and resist the urge to add too much water. Otherwise you're going to be struggling. So right now we have the consistency of about maple syrup, a little bit thicker than maple syrup. This will be perfect for our application. So I'm going to set my water aside, and I'm going to work with just my piece and my gold paste here now. So the goal here, and I'm only going to do the flowers. That's what I did on the sample piece, and I thought it turned out really nice because I have a nice mix of gold and silver, and that way I don't use a ton of gold, but I still have that look. So I'm going to take this really tiny, tiny little brush, and I'm just going to get enough on the end to make a little blob on each petal. A little tiny blob on each petal. So I finished that first one there. So I'm going to go around and do one coat on each flower, and then we'll let that dry and we'll go back for a second coat. Okay, so we had our first layer there of gold just on the little flowers. And I'm going to actually add a second layer here too. Now, one thing to keep in mind is at this point it's very powdery. So we want to dab and go. We don't want to keep dabbing and stirring up the powder that's already there. So it's kind of a, again, patience is definitely needed for this process. So again, I've got a little ball on here and I'm dabbing on every petal. And I'm making sure my consistency stays syrupy. Dabbing. And then go through the rest. So we have 2 coats on our fired piece. But before we fire it, the gold part on, I want to talk a little bit about putting the gold away now that we're done using it. So first of all, with your brush, I would take a sharp edge. I'm using my palette knife and I'm scraping as much as I can off of this brush into this little glass. I found a little piece, flew away. I'm putting that in there. Now for the brush, I'm going to go to my little wet paper towel here, and I'm just going to wipe a little bit of that off. That's quite a bit that we've quote unquote wasted here, but it can be reclaimed. You always try and get as much off as you can. Sometimes if you want to, and I've done this as well, instead of wiping it off, you can put your brush with the dry gold on it and put it in a Ziploc bag like this and just store it this way. And I actually love to store in this box. So what I'll do is I'll pop this in here. Okay. I'll pop this in here and then I'll also put this with it all together. Whoops. All together in this box. And then that way, the next time I start, I have my little glass jar all ready with powder in it. I'll just reconstitute that. I've got my other loose powder here that has not been touched. My brush can pop out, that's okay. And then I'll close this up like this, and I'll usually put a rubber band around it, and that's the way I store it. That way, if it gets bumped or I sneeze, I'm not gonna run into any problems. So that's done. That gets set aside. So here we are with our final piece. It has 2 coats of gold on each of the little flowers, just like this. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to fire this piece and burnish the gold and then come back and burnish the silver as well. Now, one thing I want to point out before we fire is, as you can see, the background here is white. And the reason it's white is because this is right out of firing. It has not been burnished, and so all those little molecules are still standing up, and it will stay white unless I get a scratch on it or something else happens. But if you're careful with it and you just wear it this way, you can keep it white as long as you want to keep it white. Now this can be tumbled eventually if you want to, and that will bring out the silver in the background. I'm leaving it like this because I think it looks pretty nifty. So now we're going to take this piece and we're going to go over and set up our firing. All right, so we're all set. I'm back in that recessed area so the bail is protected. And I'm going to start to fire. And again, just like with silver, you don't want to get too close. You want to watch for that glow. And it's interesting because the gold has a little different glow than the silver. It's actually kind of pretty once we get to that point. Here we're starting with that glow, and now we'll go 2 minutes, and we'll keep that constant salmon color. And I move my flame really fast in comparison. I know some people like, oh, do a slower flame, but I'm really kind of stuck on making sure this whole piece maintains a consistent temperature throughout torch firing. And it's personal preference, I guess, if your arm gets tired or whatnot, but it's very important to keep everything evenly heated. So, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this piece with these cross-lock pliers, And I'm going to take my agate burnisher and I'm going to gently burnish everywhere where there's gold. Now you don't have to forcefully burnish on this, just a gentle rub. And what it does is the heat of the firing actually helps adhere the gold to the silver. So I've burnished pretty much all of the gold areas, just enough to have them adhere. Okay. So now at this point, I'm not going to quench. I'm going to let it cool, just air cool. And then we're going to go back and do further burnishing. And we're going to also burnish our silver parts. I've done most of the burnishing here. And I'm doing some final burnishing on the gold. And I'm getting these leaves. I'm trying to bring up all the silver. And I'm being very careful so that I don't mar the beautiful white that I want to leave as my background. But you can kind of see where we're getting to, and it's really bringing up that shine. And ultimately, you know, we're coming up to having a piece that looks like this. So really, really easy project and very valuable working with both sterling or with fine silver and working with 24 karat gold. I hope you enjoyed the simplicity of this beautiful silver and gold project. Thanks for watching.